and welcome back to Diecast Graveyard. My name is Paul. Today's a pretty special day. I'm going to participate in my very first Diecast Mafia build-off. What we're doing today is we're taking a tow truck and we're going to customize it Diecast Graveyard style. So I've got this old Matchbox tow truck and I've got a bunch of these. I've probably got about 10 of these things, and I do plan on doing a restoration on some of them. But I wanted to take this one and dress it up Diecast Graveyard style. So let's have some fun with this. Let's go ahead and take it apart, do the autopsy, and then we'll go from there. But to all you purists out there, this is my truck, and I'm going to do with it what I want to. Now, like I said, I got plenty, and I got restorations planned for the future. Here I've got the truck drilled apart. It's only got one post in the middle. So we'll get that bad boy apart. Figure out how here. There we go. Now, there's not really an interior. All there is a colored windshield, which is green. It's got this hook, and it's all chewed up, so I figured I could think about some young kid playing with this truck with that thing hanging out of his mouth as he's chewing it as he's running through the house. So we've got to replace that hook. Let's just go ahead and rip it out of there. Make sure you do your searching for your parts before you take part in these rebuilds, because sometimes it's hard to find replacement parts for cars like this. We're going to take the Matchbox wheels off. We're going to cut off that beacon and put a new one in there. And we're going to have some fun with this. We're going to replace the tires also. These old Matchbox tires, yeah, they're really cool and everything, but they just don't say cool like real riders do. And there's some bends in the metal, so we'll fix that. Grab your favorite adult beverage and join us for today's build. Here we're going to take off the old Matchbox wheels. Now I'm doing my best to save these. If I can keep my fat head out of the way, you'll be able to see it. There, hopefully you can see it better now that my large cranium is not blocking the screen. I'm doing the best I can to take the axle and grind it down and remove the wheel without having to melt the plastic. This is definitely a big learning curve here when it comes to taking these wheels off. There we go. Alright, well, let's go ahead and move on. Now it's time to strip the paint. Here we've got the front part of the body, where we're going to dip it in the embalming fluid. Make sure you coat it really well on the inside and the outside. You want to get all that paint off there because we're going to do a complete color change, and you don't want any of that old paint showing through. So dip it in and then knock off all the excess you possibly can. And then set it on your tray, and then that way there, if you happen to glance at it occasionally, you can see whether the paint stripper has done what it needs to, or it needs to sit a little bit longer. Get rid of all that excess fluid there. And set it on your tray. Let's let that sit for a while and we'll get back to it here in just a little bit.
Several minutes later.
Alright, we got it out of the paint stripper and we ran it through and cleaned it all off and then scrubbed it down with the Zep degreaser. I went ahead and drilled out the post and tapped that and put a screw in place. Now we're going to look at putting some axle piping in the middle there. to allow you to put some new wheels in. Figure out approximately what length you need. Mark it with a pencil or a marker or even a razor. Put a line in there. And then using your razor knife, go ahead and cut the length that you need. Now I've already done 2 pieces. We're going to do the third. That fits perfectly. Now, here I should have drilled the little channels to insert the glue when you put the axle in place. I didn't do that, and later on I paid for it because when I put the glue on the axle, it actually touched the tire and glued the tire to the side of the vehicle. Now I did get it to roll freely eventually, but this is something that you'll have to consider when you're doing this yourself. The other thing I did here was I glued it in place with super glue. Really, it is better if you use some type of an epoxy like JB Weld or something along those lines to glue it in place. Now, if you put a little tiny dab of super glue to hold it, that's fine. But you'll want to come back in there with something a little bit stronger to hold that axle tube in place. And that's just something I learned. The other thing, make sure that the axle tube itself is resting on the bottom of the hole that you're putting it in, because it might raise the wheel just enough where it will rub if you let it set to where it dries when it's touching the top of the hole where you're putting the axle tube. Damn, it's awful hard to put those tubes in place with these big knockwurst fingers also. Probably would have been better had I used some tweezers, but hey, live and learn, right? Let that set for a bit. Hopefully you won't glue your hand to your car. And we'll get that last one in place. Also, when you're putting these axle tubes in place, make sure that they're centered. You don't want it to where once you glue it in place, it will make your car turn in a circle if you push it, okay? So make sure that it's centered in the channel. Well, that's looking good. Let's go ahead and move on to the next step. I scrubbed it down with Zep degreaser one more time and let it dry. Here we're going to get the base and we're going to paint this an opaque white. I'm using the opaque white from the Redline shop because this dries to a high shine when it's done. Plus it covers extremely well. Now you could go through and you could use your Createx paints, or you could use a spray can, which I don't use spray cans if I can help it. I do occasionally, but it's incredibly rare because I got some really cool airbrushes. And once you learn how to airbrush and control how much paint you're putting down, it's awful hard to go back to the spray cans because they can put up so much paint and put down so much paint when it comes to spraying your little die-cast car. And so much paint comes out of those things sometimes that it covers up the detail that you have in these cars. So that's why I try to stay away from the rattle cans. Now it's time to do the truck body itself. I had a little bit of leftover gold Spectraflame paint. I was painting up some rims for another project car, and I didn't want to pour it out and waste it. So I says, you know, I'm going to go ahead and do a fade here. So I'm going to paint the front of the truck this Spectre Flame Gold. And then I'm going to come back in later and I'm going to blend it in with some Spectre Flame Orange. And this ties in with the colors of the logo that I have, so that's why I went with these two colors. Other than that, I was seriously thinking of just painting it Spectre Flame Orange. But hey, why waste the product if you don't have to? That's looking really sharp. That Spectre Flame Gold is not used enough. It's a beautiful color. Let's come back in now and hit it with some orange. There we go. It's up to you how much you want to blend the color in there. Just as long as there's a happy medium where the two colors meet and it's a nice smooth transition. You don't want it to look like, like you painted it with a paintbrush and you can see where one color stops and the next color starts. That's one of the best things about the airbrush, is you can do those blends. If you get a chance, check out the rest of the builds from anyone participating in the Diecast Mafia build-off. You got Cole at Kuda's Diecast Customs. You got Opaz Diecast Restorations. You got 2A HD Cat to check out. Some really cool builds and some cool builders out there, so please check out their builds. Let's go ahead and move on to the next step.
Meanwhile, back in the graveyard.
That turned out fantastic. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and put on the decals. I let this set overnight so it's nice and dry. And here's the decals I'm going to put on. I wanted to pick out a logo that was a lot of fun and kind of shows my warped sense of humor. So I picked Camel Towing. I think that's a pretty darn funny logo. Once you get your decal on there, go ahead and use a Q-tip to absorb the excess water and squeegee out the bubbles from your decal. Now once you get these on, you're going to want to let them set for approximately 24 hours because you want that water underneath to dry and evaporate completely. If you don't and you spray clear coat over the top of it, it will bubble off and it'll ruin your paint job. So something to think about there. And there's today's tip from your Uncle Paulie. Now the decal in the front says 24-hour service. Set it on your door or wherever you're going to put it, blot it out with a Q-tip, and then repeat everything you did on the opposite side of the vehicle. Now another thing, when you're making your own decals and you're using the white toner, the smaller the decal, the harder it is to keep the white from bleeding off the decal underneath, okay? It just doesn't trap well and doesn't line up. So something to think about when you're getting incredibly small decals. Now that that's dried overnight, we're going to go ahead and hit that with some clear coat, both the back end and the front end of the truck. And that'll seal those decals to protect them. Now it's time to put the tires on the truck. These are the tires I chose. What I did was, the axle wasn't big enough to fit all the way through both sides of the vehicle, so I'm cutting the axle right in the very center of it, and then we're going to insert it into the tube we put into the car. Now here's the step I was talking about. I'm putting a little tiny drop on the axle to hold it. Had I went ahead and ground a little channel onto both sides of the axle tube, then your tire is not going to stick if all the glue doesn't go into the tube. So this is something for you to think about. That one's rolling pretty good, but later on I get one of them that sticks pretty nasty. So I had to break it free, which I did, but I wouldn't have had this problem had I went ahead and ground out some channels into those tubes. And again, that's something for you to consider when you're doing this yourself. Let's go ahead and move on to the next step. Now here I've got all the pieces. I got the base of the truck with those brand new Real Riders on there. They turned out fantastic. After straightening out the bumpers, which was kind of scary because those things will snap off in a heartbeat, and I was extremely lucky when it didn't happen. Yeah, that one wheel in the back is sticking a little bit. There it goes, it just broke free. We got the truck body with that gold to orange fade. That looks fantastic. I've got a brand new globe to replace the green one on top, and I got that from Bearcat 3D Designs. Check out what Grizz has to offer. He's got a lot of great 3D products for your diecast needs. And here's what we started with. This old Matchbox heavy-duty tow truck. I had several of these when I was a kid, and like I said, you can tell the hook there in the back was being chewed on by some kid. And I could picture him running through the house with this thing hanging off of his lip as he runs through the house, and it bangs him in the face. So we stripped the truck down, we took it apart, we removed the globe off the top and replaced it with that brand new yellow one. We painted it up with the Spectre Flame paints from the Redline shop. We put some Real Rider tires on there, which look fantastic with this build, and we put brand new decals on the truck and made it an absolute custom for this Diecast Mafia build. It was a lot of fun, and I really appreciated the invite from the Diecast Mafia to participate in this build. What a fun time it was. And here's the result. Look how nice that turned out. The gold to orange fade, the decals blend with it perfectly, that gold globe on top, and those real heavy duty Real Rider tires. What a beautiful addition to anyone's collection. Now, as I constantly say, folks, you folks can do this too. Watch the videos that I put out, watch the videos that my friends put out. And I also mention the products that I use because, again, I've used these products, and the folks that sponsor me and provide me with the products to show you, and the folks that are just starting out here, to show you what we use to save you time and effort searching for brand new products and going through the whole error process that you may without having to watch these videos or watching these videos in the first place. But check out all the products from the folks that support these channels. Now, to top it all off, we've got a custom card for camel towing. This was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this build. Like I said before, if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments and I'll do my best to get back to you. Had a lot of fun today. Thank you for joining me today on Diecast Graveyard. We've got a lot more videos coming up in the future, so go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And thank you again for joining me here today. If there's something you'd like to see, put it in the comments. Thank you, and cheers.